Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the news from SABA satellite channel from Arab. Here are tonight's top stories.
President Al-Alimi says Yemen peace must address Houthi threat at its roots.
The government and Houthis reach major detainee release agreement in Amman.
Supreme Economic Council reviews reforms and stability measures.
Welcome back. We begin tonight with President Al-Alimi's remarks on the prospects for peace in Yemen, where he warned that any settlement must address the roots of the conflict, not only its temporary symptoms. Speaking to a delegation from Chatham House headed by Sanam Vakil, director of the Middle East and North Africa program, President Al-Alimi said fragile truces and ceasefire arrangements only manage risk temporarily, rather than building sustainable peace. The president also stated that any approach to ending the war in Yemen will not succeed unless it deals with the Houthi militia as part of a cross-border Iranian project, not as a local political actor. He said genuine peace means building a state that guarantees rights and freedoms for all citizens, and warned that treating the Houthi militia as a normal political party would legitimize armed powers outside state institutions. Al-Alimi also linked Red Sea security to ending threats on land, stressing that maritime security cannot be protected from the sea alone. He praised the strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia, describing it as a geographic, security and strategic necessity that supports Yemen's stability, economy, services and state institutions.
A major humanitarian breakthrough has been reached in Yemen's detainees file, with the government delegation negotiating the detainees file announcing an agreement to release around 8,750 conflict-related detainees, including 27 members of the Arab coalition. The agreement follows negotiations that began in Muscat in December 2025, under the principle of all for all, followed by indirect talks in Riyadh and 14 weeks of intensive negotiations in Amman. The talks were held under the auspices of the Office of the United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen and co-chaired with the International Committee of the Red Cross. The United Nations described the outcome as the largest agreed release since the outbreak of the current conflict. UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, described the signing as a significant achievement, stressing that it marks the largest agreed release of conflict-related detainees in any round of negotiations between the parties, and demonstrates that even amid deep mistrust and prolonged conflict, dialogue can still yield results.
The ICRC said the agreement brings families closer to long-awaited reunification and committed its readiness to act as a neutral intermediary in implementing the release, transfer and repatriation process. Spokesperson of the Joint Forces Command of the Coalition to support legitimacy in Yemen, Major General Turki al-Maliki, said the file of prisoners and detainees is a humanitarian issue, receiving direct attention from the coalition until all prisoners and detainees are released. The next phase will require full and unhindered access to all detainees included in the agreement to conduct private interviews, ensuring the operation is carried out safely and with dignity. The agreement also includes a mechanism to verify the condition of Mohammed Gahtan through a joint committee, with the participation of his family and the presence of the ICRC before the release process begins.
The Supreme Economic Council, chaired by Prime Minister Sheikh Zindan, reviewed economic, financial and service conditions, as well as government measures required to strengthen stability and ease citizens' suffering. During its meeting, the Council discussed several files related to economic and financial developments, the level of implementation of government reforms, and the executive mechanisms for Presidential Council, Resolution Number 11, on approving the comprehensive economic reform priorities plans. Zindani said the current stage requires all institutions to work with national responsibility and strong coordination to confront existing economic challenges. He stressed that improving citizens' living conditions and basic services remains at the top of the government's priorities, alongside implementing realistic reforms to address weaknesses and improve public sector performance.
Minister of Planning and International Cooperation Afrah Al-Zuba chaired a meeting of the UNDP Program Board in Aden to review the results of 2025 country program document and the proposed program document for 2027 to 2029. The meeting brought together officials from relevant ministries and UNDP specialists to discuss development results, challenges, lessons learned and future priorities. Al-Zuba stressed that the new country program should align with the government's 6 national priorities and the upcoming United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. She called for a development approach that goes beyond traditional aid, focusing instead on community-led development, economic empowerment, livelihoods, production chains, exports, and strengthen local authorities. UNDP Resident Representative Zaina Ali reviewed the program's achievements despite funding and operational challenges, affirming continued alignment between humanitarian needs, recovery, and long-term development.
Minister of Defense Lieutenant General Tahir Al-Uqaili met today in Aden with the Libyan ambassador to Yemen, Idris Abu Bakr, to discuss ways to strengthen bilateral relations and areas of joint cooperation. During the meeting, the two sides stressed the importance of enhancing coordination and cooperation in ways that serve the interest of both countries and their peoples. Al-Uqaili praised the historical and brotherly relations between Yemen and Libya and valued Libya's supportive positions toward Yemen and its legitimate leadership. He also affirmed the Ministry of Defense's keenness to strengthen cooperation and exchange expertise between the two sides. For his part, the Libyan ambassador affirmed his country's commitment to developing bilateral relations with Yemen, expressing his wishes for stability and peace in the country.
Minister of State for Women's Affairs Ahad Jassous met with French Ambassador Catherine Kerm-Kamoun to discuss strengthening cooperation in support of Yemeni women's empowerment. The two sides discussed the priority of establishing a specialized information center for women's affairs, with possible French technical support to build an accurate national data system. Jassous reviewed the government's 2026 priorities for women's political and economic empowerment, including national policy-making, supportive institutional structures, a proposed women's development fund, and modern data systems serving women's issues.
In a separate meeting, Minister Ahad Jassous met with the Libyan ambassador Idris Abu Bakr to discuss strengthening the strategic partnership between the two countries in women's empowerment. The meeting focused on building sustainable women's institutions and supporting economic empowerment programs for women. The two sides also discussed the importance of establishing Women's Development Fund and exchanging expertise and experiences between Yemeni and Libyan women. The discussions highlighted ways to develop economic and social initiatives directed at women in a manner that supports their role in development and public life.
Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research Amin Nu'man met with Libyan Ambassador to Yemen Idris Abu Bakr to discuss strengthening cooperation in higher education and scientific research. The two sides reviewed their historical relations between the two countries and discussed a draft memorandum of understanding in higher education. The proposed memorandum aims to organize and expand partnership, promote the exchange of expertise, and coordinate positions in international academic forums. Nu'man stressed the importance of activating mutual visits between academics and researchers, and providing facilities to strengthen cultural and scientific exchange. The Libyan ambassador affirmed Libya's keenness to strengthen academic cooperation in shared interests.
In a separate meeting, Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research Amin Nu'man met with the Somali ambassador Abdul Hakim Ahmed. The two sides stressed the importance of continued coordination in support of educational interests, development, and scientific research. Nu'man affirmed the ministry's readiness to develop joint programs and expand cooperation with Somalia in higher education and scientific research, in line with the aspirations of both countries. The two sides also stressed the importance of strengthening academic ties and supporting cooperation that serves students and educational institutions.
Deputy Minister of Public Works and Highways Mohammed Thabit participated today in a virtual session on Sustainable Development Goal 11, which focuses on sustainable cities and communities under the theme Safe and Affordable Housing as a Human Right. Thabit stressed the importance of strengthening regional and international cooperation to support housing and infrastructure projects in ways that help build more resilient and sustainable cities and improve basic services for citizens. The session discussed key challenges and efforts related to providing safe and affordable housing in Arab countries, particularly amid prolonged crises and conflicts. It also highlighted the role of housing in strengthening social protection and sustainable urban development. Participants reviewed practical policies and solutions linked to housing, reconstruction, poverty reduction, and social inclusion through better urban development planning.
That was the news from SABA Satellite Channel. Thank you for joining us and have a good time.
Have a good time.